Hello, my name is John Story, and I own Story's Neversink Plant Company on Mount Hill Road in Neversink. I've chosen several types of seeds today to show you how they're sown, what to do about how to plant them, how to transplant them, and how to choose which ones to do this way. So first of all, I'm going to do lettuce seedlings. When you talk about the packet of seeds first, when you get seeds on the seed rack in your garden center or anywhere, it will say on it the year that was packaged for. So the seeds that are fresh this year will say 2021 on them. Anything that's different than that is an old seed, and you might not want to plant them. So in choosing the soil to plant your seeds in, you should get the soil that's in a bag, sterile, from the garden center. Don't use your garden soil. The soil in the ground is topsoil, and it does not perform well in pots. So having bought the potting soil, potting medium from the garden center, you fill up the pots, and so in this sowing seeds here, sowing the lettuce seeds, you'll see how they come out. And I'm only putting a very few in the center. And I'm looking right here where the seeds are coming off the paper, and you can see there's a couple of seeds every time it drops. And that's it. That's as far as I would go in planting the seeds. So after they're in the ground like that, I usually just to get the seeds in a little bit, and then it's in the soil, and they won't get washed away when you water them. Also, it makes it harder for the mice to find them. So after the seeds are up, moving over here, these are some seeds that I planted, lettuce seeds that I planted several weeks ago. And I wanted to show that sometimes if you have a pot where none came up, that you can transplant these and fill in the flat. So some that are too close to the edge of the pot, or where there's multiples in the pot, you can take some of these out. Here's one to take out here. And you can take these out like this and shake off that much soil off the roots and just plant them back in another cell that has nothing. And take another one like this to fill in another hole. And after you water these the first time, they'll all settle in, and you won't even know that these have been transplanted. So over here, you can see some lettuce that's even older. And here's where the seeds didn't germinate or they got washed out. So I didn't fill that in, but that's why you would want to fill it in to have a full flat. So one way that I am efficient on my space is I plant multiple seeds in a pot and then transplant them out when they come up. This pot here was done on the 28th of January. This is cabbage. And there was probably 15 or 20 plants in that pot. Way too many for you to leave that way. So in sowing the seeds, again, you just tap out a few. You see the seeds coming out. And even by doing just a few at a time like this, you're going to have multiples in the pot, but they can be thinned out later. And so that is the cabbage. Again, I always thump it a little bit just to get the seeds in a little bit. So I have a tomato here. And tomato seeds keep a long time. You can have tomato seeds that are 6, 8, and 10 years old, and the viability will still be there. The tomatoes last a long time. So again, same thing with this. So that's the tomatoes. These are all old seeds, so they won't all come up anyhow. After the seeds are sown and I put them in a water bath, the next thing I do is I have made up these hardware cloth frames, and I put this all right over the flat, right on the flat, so that the mice can't get in and get them. Mice will find them, it seems like the first night. When seeds take on water and they hydrate, they give off a gas or an odor that the mice can smell. And they find every time, every night, the first night they find them. So that's how I keep the mice off until the plants germinate and get through the squares. So today I'm also going to plant these onions and leek for my garden. This is the normal time that I would plant these to get them going in the greenhouse. So put the potting soil, the potting medium in the soil, and I dump it a little bit just to settle it. Then I open up the seed packet here, making sure that all of the seeds are down away from the open end. And I open this up. You can see the seeds in there. So what I'm doing here is I'm sowing maybe 100, 150, 200 seeds in this pot of onions. And I'll explain that a little bit after I do it. Now I'm looking right here to watch the seeds fall off. You got to get an idea how thick they're going in the pot. You can see the seeds hitting the soil. So I think that's all I want to do. That's all I want to do in this pot. And save these for another pot in case these don't come up. Now the next thing to do before I do anything else, I want to put a label on these and what they are. And this is leek. And I also put on this label the date, today's date, so that I know how old they are when they start to come up. So these seeds are in here, they're right on the surface now. And because onions can take being underground a quarter of an inch, I'll very lightly shake some soil right over the top like this. And in 10 days or so, this will look like grass coming up here. It'll be all thick in there. So that's that one. Just to do the whole thing again for you. This one is a yellow onion. Potting medium. Just settle a little bit.
I don't know if anybody else lost sound, but I can't hear the video.
I'm ready to put these in the garden. They'll be up, and I like to have a little tiny bulb on the bottom, an onion bulb. But I take these all apart, pull them out one by one, and plant them in the ground, measured out squares, and they take right off. And in the fall, I have a stock of onions. Again, this is a variety called Expression Onion, and I made this label before with a date on it. And then one more. This pot was filled before in anticipation. When I plant like this, I'm looking more at the soil, where they're hitting the soil. Must have been a lot in that one, because that was all the seeds.
Got it.
So now I'm going to put a little bit of coat on them. And that's my onion crop for this year. Okay, after this, we're going to do cuttings of ornamental plants, annuals and perennials.
Okay.
So here I am in real life. And you can see I was nervous there a couple times, almost dropped the seeds. But anybody have any questions?
Yeah,
It's all pretty straightforward. Yeah, Alan?
well, I didn't hear why you put the screen on top of those little plants.
Well, mice get the seeds very quickly, and that's just to keep the mice from being able to get into the soil.
What are you watering them with? Because I know you got to be delicate. Are you using a water pot?
Right after the first watering, I put them in a water bath, and I let them soak up the water from the bottom, which allows the soil to get fully wet and doesn't move the seeds around.
Oh, so you put, so if I got those little pots like you do, I could set those directly in a small tray of water and then it'll soak upwards.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
And then there's like a screen on top. The screen has got to be right down on the soil because the mice are skinny little things and they'll get underneath. And it seems like only half an inch, they'll get in there and eat the seeds. And really, they find them the first night, it seems.
Okay, thanks.
Another question.
Any other questions? Yes. Infinity?
Yeah, hi. I missed the first 5 minutes. So with the seed starting, you have the compartments have holes on the bottom and then you put that in a tray of water. I don't have a greenhouse. I have to do this from like inside my house. Can I put them in cups?
Sure. I've heard people using an old egg, a dozen egg carriers. Use each self of where there's an egg or put in 2 or 3 seeds.
I've tried that, but it became saturated with water. It became waterlogged and it soaked through.
Anything of any plants of any sort have to be in a container with holes in the bottom, with drainage holes. That's for seeds, it's for big plants, little plants, everything, because you can easily get them overwatered.
Okay, so being that I don't have a greenhouse, does this have to be under a window or can it be anywhere?
They should be near a window. You have to have natural light, or you could have a grow light, but you have to have light.
They have to have light.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm doing tomatoes and lettuce. So
Yep.
any special instruction for tomatoes or lettuce?
Well, lettuce is quick to come up, and you grow that at a cooler temperature in the 50s. Tomatoes take a little bit longer to come up, and need a warmer temperature to get through to the size when you're going to put them out.
Okay, is this the time that we should start this? Should we start this immediately?
Well, tomatoes usually you start around the end of March, early April. And the lettuce you can do at that same time. Lettuce can be hardened off and you can put that out in the ground, whereas tomatoes are not frost hardy at all. And they cannot go out until after frost, which would be mid to late May here.
Okay.
John, I'm hearing some static when you talk.
Yeah.
Well, I
My
think
name
it
is
was
John
on
Story,
Infinity.
and I own Stories, Neversink
Hold
Company.
on. Where are we from? Okay. All right.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. This is so informative. I am new to doing plants at all, so I saw that you sprinkled the seeds on the top and then just kind of shook them to get them into the soil a little bit. But then with the onions, you put a little soil on top. Are there any other plants that like we should know, like, oh, these should have soil on top, these don't? Is it generally don't?
Well, seeds that are tiny, like petunias, begonias, and things that are really tiny seeds, those you don't cover at all because the seeds are small enough that they fall in between the cracks in the soil. They're just a natural porosity of the soil that's falling down in. Seeds that you cover would be anything that would be BB size or up, and you'd want to cover them. They can be covered like a quarter of an inch or so because they are stronger and they come up through it.
And then, so you don't water them on the top at all? You just put them in the water tray?
Well, if you soak them from the bottom up with a water tray, you are sure that the seeds are not going to move around in the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you water them by hand or overhead, there is nothing that you can water them with that's not going to move the seeds around. and they will all end up on one side of the pot, or they're washed out, or too deep.
Okay. Okay, I think that.
But
I think-
John,
Yes,
last year I was pretty successful growing some very nice tomato plants. And they were beautiful. And then I put them in my garden and the leaves turned yellow and they just halted. Any ideas?
how big were they, and what size pot, and when did you put them out?
I put them out after frost, well after frost. I think it was even June.
Uh-huh.
They were a good size. They were probably 8 inches. You know, they were the size that you see when you buy them to put in your garden. They
Right.
weren't teeny tiny. Some
they
of
have-
them might have been bigger than 8 inches even.
Did they have flower buds on them or fruit yet?
No, they did not. No.
Okay. You don't want to have tomatoes go out with flowers and fruit that big, that old, because that means that they can get they don't grow through it sometimes. They mature the seeds. They-
Yeah, no, they didn't have any fruit or anything on them. And in fact, they didn't produce very much at all. The leaves turned yellow and
well,
they just were not successful.
if they were 8 inches long, how deep did you plant them?
I planted them relatively deep because I remember my
Yeah.
mother-in-law saying, plant them and they'll grow more roots from the stem.
Right, that's true. So if you had an 8-inch plant, you'd want to put at least 4 inches in the ground.
Yeah, I did at least that, yes.
Yeah. So did you fertilize them all when you put them in, or fertilize the ground before you planted them?
I did not. I think I fertilized the ground around them afterwards.
Well, tomatoes are heavy feeders, and when you put them
Okay.
in, you should at least water them with a water-soluble fertilizer, which is very quick acting. But you also
Okay.
want to have the ground fertile enough. You want to put fertilizer around them, if not immediately when you plant them, but within a few days.
Okay. I think I did, but I don't remember for sure.
Well, were they also planted in full sun?
Yes.
Okay, that's important. Well, try them again. You know, I encourage people to try again.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
John, how long did it take you to become a master gardener as a newbie?
Of 70 years.
Okay, great. I'm on it.
I have a question.
Yes.
You're standing in a greenhouse. Where are you? Are you in this? Now you're in a video in a greenhouse, but
Yeah.
We're still going to get. It's going to be in the 20s and lower. I can't do anything in my greenhouse yet. Do you heat your greenhouse?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You can't have. Well, in fact, the only way that you could get through the winter with anything in your greenhouse, if you don't have heat in it, would be for a plant that could tolerate being outdoors anyhow. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
I have two separate sections of my greenhouse, and end to end, and I have a heater in each one, and I run one house at 40 or 42, and the other house I run at 50, 55. And the 50, 55 ones are plants that need a little more heat, but the 40-degree house is for plants that need to be dormant, but are not hardy enough to be frozen dormant. So like that would be like cannas, dahlias, other subtropical plants that you want to keep from year to year, fuchsias, all of those things. And they really like being 40 degrees and resting during the winter, because then when they heat up and have long days like now, in another week or two, you'll see things are going to pop real quick.
I have a
In
question.
a greenhouse, we've got a lot of snow on the ground still.
Oh, so do we.
I have a question about when you were planting the onions. Did you have holes in those large pots?
Yes, every pot I have has
Okay.
holes in it. Everything. In fact, sometimes people come to me with a fancy pot and they want to put something in it, and I just refuse to do it because it doesn't make any sense to put a plant in a pot that doesn't have a hole in it. They're drainage holes. Anything
I
else?
have another question. It's not exactly what you're doing, but I bought a bunch of bulbs, and tubers and things for, I have like clematis and in particular, the clematis. And they're in plastic bags sealed. And I think it may be too long before I can put them in the ground. Should I put them in pots first?
You probably should, because you got about 6 weeks before you're gonna be past frost, at least that long.
Exactly. Okay.
But put them in a sunny
That's what
window.
I would do.
Are they,
I'm sorry?
are they making growth yet?
No. Oh, I don't know. I haven't opened the bags.
Well, if they're making growth, you must get them out into a pot. But if they are still dormant, if you have tuberous begonias or caladiums or something like that as a bulb, and they're not pushing, then leave them cool and dry. Don't put them in the soil. Don't water them, and then hold on to them for another 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm doing that with the gladiolas. They're fine for a while.
Yeah, well, they're going to go right in the ground anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's going to go right in the ground. I
Right.
think I got some Laetris also tubers.
Right. Okay.
John, are we
Thanks.
zone 7 here in New York?
No, we're zone 5.
Zone 5? Okay.
Unfortunately, zone 5 means it'll go down to 0 to -5 almost every winter, or in the single digits at least.
Okay.
Zone,
And-
zone 6 would be when you wouldn't go below the high teens.
Okay.
Or-
Now, when can we safely put out, because with the spinach, we need to directly sow that into the garden, right? Instead of
Yeah.
starting, okay.
Yeah.
When can we safely do that?
As soon as you can turn the soil and it's dry enough to work, and it doesn't have to be past frost, because spinach is quite a hardy plant. You can plant it in the fall, get it germinated, get it going, it'll last through the winter and be there to grow in the spring. But if you're planting it in the spring, you can do it as soon as you can work the soil, when it's dry enough to do that. And just
Okay.
sow it directly in the ground.
Is there any other vegetables that we can do along with the spinach at this time?
Not really. Lettuce can take some cold weather, but if it's, lettuce could probably take to 30 degrees. Spinach can take to at least the low 20s, I would say. But
Oh.
nothing else is going to be hardy enough to do that with.
Okay.
If you put carrots and beets in the ground that early, they're just going to sit there and wait until the ground warms up.
Okay.
What about potatoes?
Sorry?
What about potatoes?
Well, I would think you'd have to wait until the ground warms up. They grow pretty fast anyhow once you get them going. So I'd put them in like in early to mid-May. Any other questions? I guess we're ready for the next video.
No, please, I have to ask you about the drain holes because I missed the first 5 minutes of the webinar. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the link.
Okay.
You're saying don't bother doing it. So I have plastic cups, so I need to drill drain holes, or can I punch drain holes with an ice pick? And then where does the water go? Because again, I don't have a greenhouse. I'm just gonna have to do this like basically in my living room because I don't have that many good windows.
You have to put a tray under it.
Okay.
Because
And then-
you want the water to run out of that container, and then you gotta water it when it dries out again.
And then how do I water it from below as opposed to above?
Well, if you have it in a saucer and you've watered it from the bottom and it's sitting in the water, after it soaks up and gets wet, then you dump the rest of the water off. You don't want it sitting in water because that'll be the same as if you had no hole in the pot.
Okay,
So-
okay, so I don't understand so where do I put the water? How do I water them again?
If you have a saucer or some kind of tray that you can put water in, you put your seeds in the pot in the water to soak up the water.
Uh-huh.
As soon as it's fully wet, you can tell because the soil will change color. As soon as it's fully wet, then you take and dump the water that's left in the bottom, dump it out. And then so the plant is sitting there in a saucer without water, and the drain hole is only when the plant gets old enough that you can water on top, and then the water will run through it.
How do I know when it's old enough to water it on top?
When you can water it and it doesn't move the plant around in the pot. Once it's up and rooted in, it'll stay put.
Okay, and how many times a day do I water it?
You probably water it twice a week, or what you would need to do is you need to check it every day. You need to look at it every day. And then you just wait until it's looking dry. And then you put some water in a saucer and it'll soak it up. And after an hour, it'll soak up enough and you dump the rest out. The next day you have to look at the water, look at the plant again, and it'll probably still be wet. The next day after that, one of those days is going to get dry and then you water. You have to look at these every day. This is like having a pet that you feed every day.
Okay, but I'm really not watering it. I'm adding water to the tray underneath it.
Well, when I had growers and I was telling them teaching them how to grow, I always said you have to check it every day, but you don't have to water it every day. You have to look at it every day.
Okay.
Like having a pet, you have to take care of it. If it's got fleas, you treat it. If it's hungry, you feed it. Whatever.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
You know those little black takeaway containers you get from restaurants? They're rectangular, they're about 10 inches long, 4 inches wide. Makes a good tray to hold the cup.
Yeah.
Instead of
Okay,
throwing,
that's cool. How do I know when it's time? When is it safe to plant them in the ground?
When it's past frost, that would be middle of May at least.
How big do the plants need to be before I can transfer them into the ground?
As long as you can take them out of the pot and the soil won't fall apart because they have enough roots to hold it together, then it's okay to go.
So for tomatoes, would that be 1 inch, 3 inches high?
It would be 4, 5, 6 inches high.
4 to 6 inches high. And for the lettuce, how high should the lettuce be before I transfer it? Because I'm going to start the lettuce in the house. It's just easier.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you can get it out of the pot and it holds together.
Also 4 to 6 inches?
And before that.
2 to 3 inches?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so the tomato plants need to be slightly larger than the lettuce does.
Right. But the lettuce can go out earlier than the tomatoes because the tomatoes are not at all frost hardy.
Yeah, okay, so, okay, plant early, okay. And, okay.
A lot of the things that you put out, you'll have warm weather and then you're going to get a cold spell later on. And you may have to go out and cover them with something. Just to keep them from freezing the first night or two when there's a frost.
No, I'm gonna wait until the frost is over. Okay. And, all right, and the final question is, would you consider opening up the chat box so we could type questions in?
I thought we were going to have a chat back here. Yes.
I don't have the chat box open. I can't seem to access a lot of my controls with the share screen. Let's just leave it like this.
Okay.
Hi, John. I have one last question. To conserve the moisture in the soil, what would you advise in terms of mulch? I was using shredded straw, but someone said that the little flea beetles that I was getting on my squash was because of the straw. Is that correct?
No, that's not right. The flea beetles will be there no matter what you mulch with. The flea beetles are something that happens every year in everybody's garden. If you're growing eggplant, broccoli, cabbage, many things, flea beetles get on it. But you can use the dust to keep them away. And there are organic things. As far as what I would use for mulch, I chip up all of my leaves that I rake up in the fall, and we have a big pile of shredded leaves. And after I get the plants in the ground and get them going, I mulch everything with them. And then at the end of the season, you have all of this organic material you flip over and put in the ground.
Thank you. That's a great idea. Thank you so much.
You can be pretty liberal with the leaves. 4 or 5, 6 inches on big plants. If you're mulching tomatoes, you can put on 4 inches deep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I
have a seed question, John.
Sure, go ahead.
I have frozen, a couple of bags of frozen Sun Gold cherry tomatoes, and I'm wondering if I thaw them out, can I use the seeds?
Well, maybe. Depends on if they were frozen solid, they were in a freezer.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know if they're that hardy, but the general rule for storing seeds is that the number for relative humidity and the number for temperature should be less than 100. That means if you have 50% humidity, you want to have at least 50% or under on the temperature. So if they're frozen, I don't know how that translates. But what I would say, well, it's about time to start them now anyhow. But if you don't want to make a big commitment with a lot of soil, I would take 8 or 10 seeds and pre-germinate them on a paper towel and see how many sprout. You should know in a few days. If you'll see the radicle on the seed come out pretty quick.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, so I think we'll start on the other video, and then there'll be time for questions now, more at the end of this one too. Next, we're going to talk about doing cuttings of ornamental plants. The same techniques can be used for annuals and any perennials that aren't flowering yet. So the easiest one that I have here of these plants is a Transplanting, also called a watering Jew, and these are very popular because they're so easy to grow. This plant here is easy enough to grow that when I propagate this, I take the tip of the plant like this and just put the end of it into the soil a little bit like that. And keep it moist, keep it warm. And believe it or not, this is all there is to this plant. This is why it's so popular. It's good for kids. It's a good starter plant for kids because they can hardly fail with it. So when you have a variegated plant like this one, such as this, when you're propagating it, what you want to do is look for plants and leaves stems that are uniformly variegated. Ones you don't want to take are ones that have reverted to totally white or to all green. This one here is starting to go mostly white or green. And these plants will vary from time to time. This pot right now does not have anything that is all green or all variegated, but I'm going to keep taking the cuttings here to fill in all the holes in the middle. And that's all there is to it. 2 more and I'll be done. There are a lot of varieties of Transplanting, wandering Jew. There are some succulent varieties, and they all are this easy to grow. And there you see I've got this pot filled up. All right, so this is Transplanting, wandering Jews. The next plant I have to propagate here is a English ivy variety. And I chose this plant because it will root itself. And all you have to do is find the stems where they've already made roots. You see the roots right here. And this cutting, what I would do really on this one here is you can break this into several pieces. This is the tip of it. Take off the bottom leaf and just stick it right in the soil. And the other piece that had the roots and the leaf, stick it right in the soil, and that's it. Keep them moist. So you can fill the whole flat like that. So you can make many, many cuttings out of these when you do them. Just stick them in just like that. And as Lydia says, just like that. And just like that. Okay, so that's how you do that one. So the next plant I'm going to propagate here is a Plectranthus. And these will be node cuttings. A node is the spot where the leaf attaches to the stem. So this is a node, this is the inner node. So what you want to do is try to get these cuttings long enough that you have at least one node to grow, and these will both grow branches out like that. The tip of this is too soft and immature to root. It takes a very specialized conditions for it to root. You could, but I can't do it in my greenhouse, and probably you can't do it at home either very well. But anyhow, stick this in like this. Now, you have to look at the leaf surface, and if there's too much, one way to take care of that is just to trim it down like this. So you have reduced transpiration until it gets rooted. So you can get root tone at most garden centers. This is a rooting compound, rooting hormone. And it's totally harmless to people and pets. So you can get it on your hands. So you've reduced the leaf surface. And then you dip the end of this into the root tone and put it in a flat you're propagating like that. Get it down deep so that the node is right next to the soil. This will root. We'll reduce the leaf surface a little bit or a lot. Just get it in the root zone a little bit and then stick it in the soil. So the whole point of this is that the more you do some of these techniques in horticulture, the better you get at them. You should try to do something a lot. That way you have more success. Now, sometimes when the nodes are too close together, not too close, but very close, you can take the bottom node off and then leave two nodes. And so what you're doing then is a two-node cutting. What I've done here, I took the tip out, the little soft growth on top, that doesn't root well. And because of all the leaf surface here, I'm going to reduce it like this. So you've reduced the leaf surface a lot, transpiration. Sometimes if it still looks like it's too much, you can take another whole leaf right totally off and just reduce it more. In fact, this roots so easily, I can even do that one. And that will root. So that's this from here. And one more stick, I might just stick it in. All right. And the next plant I'm going to do, which you might have at home, this is a fuchsia. And this is where I can show you a two-node cutting because these are such small little cuttings. And if you put in a two-node cutting, you're going to get 4 branches coming instead of 2. So you get more of a plant right away. Like all plants, you take the softest tip out, throw it away, and then leave this as a two-node cutting with enough stem on it to stick in the ground so that it'll stay there. And just to reduce the leaf surface a little bit, almost always reduce the leaf surface. It only can help. Again, dip it in a root zone a little bit and just stick it in the soil. And now some of these are going to be different lengths. This is a two-node cutting, but it's a small one, but it'll work. Stick it in. So the whole point is that you do this a lot. You get lots of experience doing it, and you get better at it. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'll do one more just for green. Because these are such short cuttings, almost all of these are good for two-node cutting, 2 nodes cutting. All right, that's that one. Now, one last thing I want to do, and it's the same theory as all the rest of these, but it's a little bit different in that there's so much more to do here to get this ready. So this is Geranium Vancouver Gold, a Vancouver Centennial. And you want to clean up the plant and get off everything that a plant doesn't need to propagate. You take off all the flowers, all the yellow leaves. Geraniums are notorious for having yellow leaves. And so after I take off the worst of this, okay, so now I'm looking here to get a nice smooth stem that's green, not brown. If you get to the wood, the brown, that makes it too woody. But you can see here, I'm going to take this right here, like that. And I'm going to cut off a few of these first. So you can see how you would cut it. what I'm looking for are this nice fast growing shoots that are all green, all young stuff. Yeah, not too young. See how these are too small to take. So each of these cuttings now has way too many leaves on it. So I'm starting from the bottom up, taking the leaves off until you get to the point where you seem like it's in proportion. Here's a flower bud. The geranium does not need a flower bud in order to root. And one more. So now you can see this is a nice young tissue, a clean cutting. You're gonna dip it in a root zone and stick it in the soil. This is why there should be an apprentice program in this for all the trades, because this is how I learned it at my dad's knee. I've done so many cuttings I can do it in my sleep. So there you have it. And take the flower buds out, dip it in a root zone, and stick it in the soil. And so that's how you do vegetative cuttings on most of your annuals, and some perennials can be done that way. Thanks for watching. Any questions?
Can I ask what the white powder is, please?
Yep, that is root zone. It's a rooting hormone, mostly talcum powder, but it's got some active ingredient in it.
Where can we buy it pre-made?
Oh yeah, you can get little things of it at any garden center, most garden centers.
Do you know what it's called?
Well, rootone.
Aluthones?
R-O-O-T-O-N-E.
R-O-O-T.
O-N-E.
R-E-N-E. Rootrine.
No. R-O-O-T-O-N-E.
Rootone. Got it.
Right, rootone.
And could we use that on vegetables or as well, or just plants?
It's just for cuttings.
Could we use it for cuttings of something that we'll be eating?
Yes. But what would that be?
Well, I heard you could take scallions or herbs even like basil and do root cuttings for those.
You can do cuttings of basil. That would work.
Okay. And
but a lot of herbs are grown from seed.
Right, but sometimes, you just have it. So you can use the rootone for basil. And what would happen if we tried to do what you were doing without that rootone product? Would it still work?
Somebody has. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. Unfortunately, that's the sound of my computer.
Okay. Well, if you don't use a rootone, some things can still root and some things won't, but it just helps them to root.
Okay, thank you.
It's certainly no guarantee that things are going to root. Okay, anything else?
John, I have a seed question and
Surely.
a rooting question. I
All right.
have some heirloom beans that came down in my grandmother's family, and I haven't planted them for several years. I tried them last spring just in a pot in the house, and they didn't germinate. Do you have any suggestions? Because I know my grandmother kept them for several years, a time or two, and she was able to grow them.
Well, like I said previously, one of the rules of thumb about storing seeds is that the relative humidity and the temperature numbers both need to be less than 100. So my guess is that beans that are that old, whether they're heirloom or not, probably are not going to be much good because they may have been stored wrong, but also that's a long time for them to remain viable. But
Okay.
the way you can tell is take 5 or 6 or 10 and pre-germinate them on a wet paper towel. Just keep it moist all the time at room temperature and see which ones sprout. And if 6 out of 10 sprout, you'll have roughly half your crop.
Okay, thank you. I'll try that.
Sure. And the cuttings?
In cuttings, I tried last fall to root some cuttings from some shrubs that we were removing, but I wanted to replant them in a smaller version. I think I only had one that rooted. Do you have any suggestions for
Yeah.
a better way to root woody type plants?
Well, woody plants is a whole nother thing. Most woody plants, deciduous woody plants, you would use mature new growth, which means the new growth that came out this year in the spring, but it's mature, not woody, but mature. And that would be like probably in this climate, probably around early to late May or late June. Anywhere
Okay.
in that period of time. And then you treat them just like any other cutting because they're going to be basically a cutting with leaves on it. Reduce the leaf surface and use hormone and then put a tent on them, try to keep them humid and root them that way. Now, if you're going to do conifers, evergreen stuff, that is even a third way. Those usually are taken in the fall as mature new growth and rooted, stuck in the ground and they take all winter to root. And if you're lucky and you do it right, you'll have roots on them by the time you dig them out in the May or June the following year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now on the deciduous plants, if you're going to move some, check to see if there's not some natural layering, because many woody shrubs will, the branches that lay low on the ground will lay there long enough that they root. And you can separate them from the plant and then you got a young plant again.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Yes. Alan?
You recommend a specific soil, like your starting soil, like a company or something? I know you don't start with potting soil, do you, for your seeds?
Well, you can, and I do, but usually you can find seed starting mix, seedling mix, where they're selling other types of soil. All it is a more finely particled soil.
And that's what you want to start the seeds in.
Right. So seeds that I would do a special soil like that would be ones that are really fine seeds, because they will not fall into the cracks of this more porous soil.
And another question about what you discussed just now about lettuce seeds, for instance, that are very fine. Even if I'm outside and I'm planting them in my garden, I should just drop them right on the ground and not have a little tiny ditch with my finger.
Well,
right?
I would mess the dirt up a little bit to get them under a little bit, but I wouldn't make a trench. I would just what I do with spinach and the lettuce is I prepare a big area, 4x4 or something, and just broadcast the seeds over the whole thing. I don't make rows of it, and I just broadcast the seed. And the soil being freshly raked out is going to be a little porous, and I just expect the seeds to fall in the cracks, and they do pretty much. So I would say 99% of them germinate that way.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Carl is sitting there quiet and then interested. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, so I just bought potting soil because I thought that's what we were supposed to use. I'd never heard of seedling mix before. So can I use the potting soil for the lettuce and tomatoes?
Yes, you can, because they're both fairly coarse seeds.
Okay, but seedling mix is a superior product for what we're doing with the seeds?
No, it's just another item, another type of soil that's more finely sifted out. But you can pretty much make your own seedling mix if you took regular potting soil, put it through your sifter. Use a kitchen sifter if you want to, and put it through, push it through by hand.
Okay, that works.
But you don't need to, The thing is, if you're trying to do fine seed, it helps. But the truth of the matter is that if I were a homeowner without a greenhouse, I wouldn't try those fine seeds, because those are the more difficult ones to germinate, to get going for the first couple of weeks of their life. And when you consider the expense and the trouble and this percent success with those types of seeds, you're better off spending a couple of dollars to buy a 6-pack.
Okay,
No?
okay. Unfortunately, I had a household interruption and I missed what you said. I didn't hear what you said about the seedling mix. after you said about, I can put it through a sifter.
If you use your regular potting soil, put it through the kitchen sifter, you'll end up with some very fine seed, some very fine material on top of the soil.
Right, I got that. After that, you were talking about fine seeds. I couldn't hear what you said.
Growing finer seeds like begonias, impatiens, snapdragons, things like that. When you consider the success rate and the difficulty of doing them at home without a greenhouse, I figure it's almost better to just buy a 6-pack, because if you want 12 plants, you buy 12 plants and you got them. Whereas to produce 12 snapdragons at home, because it's a very fine seed, is next to impossible. So I don't want to discourage people from trying stuff, but do the stuff that you're going to be successful with, like tomatoes and eggplant and peppers and stuff like that, because there's bigger seeds, easier to handle. Anything else?
That sounds like that's all the questions.
I guess so, right?
Thank you so
So-
much, John. That was
we-
wonderful. I
we
learned a
encourage-
lot.
We encourage everybody to give a call and come visit. And if you think of more questions, why, I'll be here to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for sharing the knowledge, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah,
Thank
you're welcome.
you.
Thank you, John, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks for organizing.
Okay, you can find
Welcome.
it. Google us and find us online.
Hi.
Thank you, John.
Thank you again, John, and thanks, Diana, too.
What's the name of your website so I can find you online?
It's stories, Neversink plants at gmail.com.